Every meeting you walk into has an invisible hierarchy that decides who actually gets heard, whose ideas get implemented, and whose voice gets quietly filtered out, and most people spend their entire career without ever learning to see it. Once you know what to look for, every meeting starts to look like a completely different room. Here's the thing nobody tells you about meetings. The person sitting at the head of the table isn't always the one who actually decides anything. Their title might say director or VP, but the real call about what happens next is being made by one or two people in that room who have the social capital, the relationships, and the unwritten authority to either champion an idea or quietly kill it. Watch what happens after a meeting ends. The official decision was made inside the room, but the real decision happens in the 5-minute hallway conversation between two people. They debrief. They calibrate. They agree on the actual next step that may or may not match what the room concluded. If you don't know which two people are having that hallway conversation, you're not in the hierarchy yet. You're just on the meeting roster. The way to find them isn't to ask who's senior. It's to watch the body language during the meeting itself. The decision makers don't fight for floor time because they don't need to. They sit slightly back. They take fewer notes. When someone presents an idea, they don't ask clarifying questions. They make small, almost imperceptible reactions. A subtle nod that signals approval. A blank expression that signals the idea is dead. Other people in the room watch those reactions and adjust accordingly, often without knowing they're doing it. That's the hierarchy. It runs on micro-signals between 2 or 3 people, and everyone else is following their lead. Once you start looking for it, the hierarchy becomes visible through dozens of tiny signals you've been missing your whole career. The biggest one is eye contact direction during a contested moment. When someone makes a controversial point, the entire room briefly looks at one specific person to read their reaction before deciding how to respond. That person is the actual judge of the conversation. They're not always the official lead. Sometimes they're the senior engineer everyone respects. Sometimes they're the chief of staff who's been around longest. Sometimes they're the quiet skeptic who has veto power because they've been right too many times to ignore. The second signal is interruption patterns. Watch carefully real seniority interrupts. People who are lower in the hierarchy almost never interrupt. They wait for openings. They apologize before they speak. They say, "Sorry, can I jump in?" People at the top interrupt without hesitation, and importantly, nobody pushes back when they do. If you find yourself routinely waiting for permission to speak, you're being trained by the room to operate at a certain level, and that training is hard to undo unless you become aware of it. The third signal is who closes the loop on disagreements. In any contested topic, multiple people will offer opinions back and forth. Eventually, one person makes a comment that ends the discussion, not by being aggressive, but by reframing the question in a way that makes further argument feel pointless. That person, the closer, is operating from real authority. Pay attention to who closes loops in your meetings. That's who you actually work for, regardless of what the org chart says. Now here's the uncomfortable part, figuring out where you actually rank, not where you think you rank. Most people overestimate their position in a meeting hierarchy by 1 to 2 levels, and the gap between perceived rank and actual rank is one of the most common reasons careers stall without people understanding why. Run this test on your last 3 meetings, honestly. When you spoke up, where did people direct their eyes for reaction? If they looked at someone else across the room, that person is the authority on what you said, not you. If they looked at you, you have more standing in that group than you might realize. Second, when you finished making a point, did the next person to speak build on your idea, or did they pivot to something different? Building on signals respect. They think your point was worth integrating into the next thought. Pivoting signals, I heard you, but I'm not going to engage. 3 pivots in a row from senior people is a strong signal that the room has quietly decided your contributions aren't load-bearing yet. Third, when you proposed something and someone with more rank pushed back, did anyone in the room defend your idea? Allies are the most underrated indicator of hierarchy. Solo voices get filtered out. Voices with even one defender become positions worth debating. Here's what actually works for moving up, and it's almost always counterintuitive to what people try. The fastest path is to speak less and make every word count. People who talk a lot in meetings are almost always mid-tier. They're trying to demonstrate value through volume, through showing they're prepared, that they have opinions, that they understand the topic. The actual top of the room operates differently. They speak rarely. They might say 2 things in an hour-long meeting. But when they do speak, the room stops to listen, and what they say tends to either resolve a disagreement, introduce a frame nobody else had, or kill an idea cleanly enough that nobody resurrects it. You can fake your way into that pattern with a simple discipline. Hold back your first 3 thoughts in any meeting. Don't say them. The first 3 thoughts are usually reactions or small additions that don't move the conversation. Wait for your 4th thought, the one that's load-bearing, the one that synthesizes what's been said or names what nobody else is willing to say. Make that one contribution and stop talking. Within 3 meetings of doing this, something subtle changes. The people in the room start treating your input differently. They wait for it. They lean in slightly when you start to speak because they've trained themselves to expect that whatever you say is going to be worth more than the noise. You haven't actually become smarter or more senior. You've just stopped diluting your authority by speaking when you had nothing essential to add. And if you're already at the bottom of the hierarchy and trying to climb, here's the move that actually works. Find the person 2 ranks above you. Not the most senior person, not your direct boss, but the person who's close enough to you that they remember climbing and far enough above you that the room treats them seriously. Mirror their meeting cadence. Mirror how they prepare. Mirror who they thank publicly and who they push back on. People rise in groups, not as individuals, and your fastest path up is to be standing close to someone who's already on the way up. The people at the top of any meeting hierarchy didn't get there because they were the smartest people in the room. They got there because they were the first to be standing close to someone who was moving up, and because they made themselves useful in ways that were visible. Those 2 things in combination are how careers actually compound. The room has a structure. You can spend your career not knowing it exists and wondering why some people just seem to get heard while you don't. Or you can learn to read the signals and start placing yourself in the spots that change who you become in 3 years. Once you see the hierarchy, you can never unsee it.